The 1% is making a promise today as the nation's CEOs have all signed a pledge vowing to continue fucking over Americans in the face of all this uncertainty. We've got the latest on this shining commitment to oppress the powerless from the world's financial leaders. From The Onion and Onion Public Radio, I'm Leslie Price, and this is The Topical. Thankfully, we're the only podcast around that discusses news and politics, so I don't really have to say this, but I will anyway. Stay with us. It's an inspiring promise being made by some of the country's wealthiest citizens in face of the devastating coronavirus pandemic. Earlier this week, CEOs from every single Fortune 500 company signed a pledge vowing to continue fucking over Americans during these difficult times. Terrence Winchell, the longtime CEO of agrochemical company RKL, spoke on behalf of the country's CEOs.
As the business leaders of this country, we promise to never, ever stop fighting to ensure that the vast majority of Americans aren't able to afford the products or care they need. Making people suffer is more than just good business for us. It's our passion. No pandemic will ever get in the way of that.
For more on this pledge, we're joined by OPR's Remy Berglund.
Hi, Leslie.
Remy, how did this pledge come to be?
This all reportedly began with Walmart CEO Doug McMillon, who felt that Americans needed to know that he and his peers were still thinking about all the ways they will continue fucking the public over during these tough times. So he reached out to other CEOs like Jeff Bezos and Bob Iger, and before you knew it, hundreds of billionaires and multimillionaires united to double down on things like overcharging for basic necessities, crushing local businesses, and manufacturing shitty products that fall apart immediately.
Wow, that's a real murderer's row of CEOs. Where did they make this pledge?
It first appeared, as I'm sure many of our listeners noticed, as a full-page ad in the New York Times with the headline, "We're still fucking you sideways."
Yeah, I read that. I thought this part was really touching. Let me read it here. "We won't let the coronavirus stop us from squeezing every last cent we can out of you and your families, and we will not rest until we have completely overwhelmed you with cynical advertising campaigns and empty PR rhetoric to make you feel like we are on your side." I mean, wow, those are powerful words.
Yeah, these CEOs really want Americans to know that they still see them as brainless monkeys they can hawk their products to, especially now. I actually was able to talk to Terrence Winchell, one of the CEOs, after the press conference announcing the pledge.
Remy, can you hear me? There's some construction. We're getting a little spaceship attached to the house.
Yep, I can hear you. So, why did you sign this pledge?
Well, my old fishing buddy, Brian Roberts, CEO of Comcast, calls me up and says, "Terrence, what do we always talk about wanting to do?" And I said, "Find as many ways as we can to rob, cheat, and swindle ordinary people, especially the vulnerable ones." And he said, "There's no better time to do that than now." And now we're here.
So this promise to screw over all of us runs pretty deep.
That's right. We're just building on the promises our CEO forebears like John Rockefeller and Henry Ford made to the people of this country to stop at nothing to make them suffer from purchasing goods they can't afford. And we think it will mean a lot to regular people to see CEOs from Coca-Cola to coal mining all signing a pledge to stop at nothing to make their lives a living hell.
It seems like they want to ensure Americans that they'll still be raking them over the coals just like they were before, coronavirus or not.
Right. They want to reinforce a sense of normalcy.
Yeah.
They even went as far as letting Americans know that they will ensure that public officials bend to their will and continue giving them tax breaks, so life is only easy for corporations.
Thank you, Remy. It's so inspiring in these troubling times to see our leaders of industry taking a stand against everyone else, including our very own OPR CEO, Tim Spinfuller. What a guy. We'll be back with more right after this. With mounting evidence that the spread of coronavirus could be airborne, another government agency has put out strict new guidelines to help contain the disease. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which focuses on dangerous weather conditions at sea, announced they'll be ordering all hurricanes that visit the U.S. to quarantine for 2 full weeks in the state where they hit landfall before traveling along the coast. I'm joined now by wet weather correspondent Marcy Hammond.
Hi, Leslie.
Marcy, why are the nation's weather officials taking these measures?
Well, with winds of over 150 miles per hour and the ability to move through several states in a matter of days, weather officials say that hurricanes have the potential to be coronavirus super spreaders. Dr. Alistair Buxley, a representative from the NOAA, gave a short press conference this morning in which he explained the new policy. Here he is.
The virus spreads via respiratory droplets that an irresponsible hurricane can easily pick up from any infected resident that it bashes around in its high winds. The fast-moving storms can also catch COVID-19 from contaminated surfaces in any of the homes or businesses the storm completely pulverizes. This is why we're recommending that after flooding entire cities and killing a number of people, these tropical cyclones must storm in place for a full 2 weeks before traveling to a different area.
Always better to be safe than sorry, but Marcy, how likely is it that a hurricane could come down with coronavirus in the U.S.?
It's very likely, depending on its entry point. States like Florida and Texas, which get several hurricanes a year, have recently seen cases of COVID-19 skyrocket. So even a careful Category 1 that spends less than 24 hours in one of these states could end up being exposed to thousands of infected people before leveling their communities, which is exactly what the NOAA is trying to prevent.
Sure. Now, obviously, every precaution we can take to stop the spread of this virus helps, but how do weather officials plan to enforce these regulations?
That's a good question. Dr. Buxley says that enforcement will be tough. Here he is again.
We'll be putting up warning signs along the coast, informing approaching storms of the new guidelines and offering free temperature checks before entry. And while no arrests will be made, any tropical storm that does not follow these rules or is known to have spent time on any Caribbean island with a high rate of coronavirus cases could be deported and issued a $10,000 fine.
Hopefully such a steep penalty will defer such risky weather patterns.
Well, Buxley and his team are also asking residents for their help, reminding them to evacuate to a spot that is at least 6 feet away from any approaching storm and to wear a mask if they plan on being directly in the path of a Category 5.
Now, Marcy, one question I have is why don't coastal states like Florida and Texas, where the majority of hurricanes make landfall, just ban the storms from traveling to their states altogether?
Well, Leslie, unfortunately, shutting down a state completely to these extreme weather patterns could have a negative effect on the state's economy. For instance, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says the destruction that hurricanes bring to the area provides thousands of jobs to local first responders, cleanup crews, and construction businesses every year.
Makes sense. Balancing a healthy economy and killing people is a delicate dance.
That's very true.
Thanks, Marcy. That's OPR's Marcy Hammond. Back in a moment. Well, pretty soon, if you're looking to buy toys for an infant or toddler in your life, you might have to look somewhere other than FisherPrice. The popular children's toy maker is reportedly making some big boy changes to its brand after 89 years. For more on the changes, I'm joined by OPR consumer reporter Marcy Hammond. Welcome, Marcy.
Thanks, Leslie.
So what exactly is FisherPrice changing and why?
Well, it sounds like the toy manufacturer is wanting to produce more mature products because, as FisherPrice head Chuck Scothen told reporters this morning, the company was, quote, tired of making stupid toys for babies. Here he is with more in the new direction.
All these toys are for dumb little babies. Well, we don't want to make stupid toys anymore for idiot babies who can't even talk. We want to make awesome stuff that's really fun. So we're going to start making cool grown-up stuff like trucks and spaceships and awesome stuff.
That seems like a pretty big undertaking for a company that's made rattles and corn poppers for the last 9 decades.
Well, Scothen says that FisherPrice has been really, really extra good, and that it's time that they get to make products that all the other companies get to make.
Why does Nerf get to make guns and blasters and we only get to make boring, dumb stuff? We're way older than Nerf. We should at least be allowed to make airsoft guns or super real-looking video games with gangs and scary monsters and stuff. Whatever. We'll show you. We're going to start making super cool rocket ships immediately. They're going to be yellow and black and have a bunch of lasers and machine guns, and when it lifts off, it's going to go and they're going to land on Mars, and we're going to meet aliens and kill them.
Ooh, that does sound pretty cool. But Marcy, what prompted such a drastic decision?
Well, some sources have told me that FisherPrice was made fun of by its older sister subsidiary, the Barbie division, for still needing diapers to play with its toys.
Ooh.
Apparently, Scothen ran away crying, and when he was found later, he announced the decision to the rest of the company.
So is there anything holding FisherPrice back from starting productions on laser and machine gun-equipped yellow and black rocket ships?
Well, FisherPrice's parent company, Mattel, does have the final say, and they don't seem too keen on FisherPrice getting into weaponry, or according to Mattel CEO Ynon Kreiz, anything that's not suitable for those 5 and under.
No. Rocket ships are way too dangerous. People could get hurt. Maybe Hasbro lets Nerf and G.I. Joe do whatever they want with their funding, but as long as FisherPrice is living under the Mattel umbrella, they're going to have to live by our rules. Besides, FisherPrice loves making its Woodsy Wonders bouncer and Baby's First blocks.
Oh boy, and how did FisherPrice respond?
About as well as you would expect.
No! I hate Woodsy Wonders and Baby's First blocks. They're for stupid little babies. I hate them, I hate them, I hate them! I want to make missiles and bombs and video games!
Mr. Scothen eventually tired himself out and was laid down for a nap.
Poor little guy. Heads of subsidiaries want to grow their brands so fast these days. Well, he'll get over it.
I wouldn't count on that. Shortly after our interview, FisherPrice seemingly rebelled against its parent company and started manufacturing rockets without permission that looked like they were constructed using a toy school bus and a Snuggle Monkey cradle duct taped together with a xylophone on which the bars were labeled dynamite. Mattel has already recalled all the sold missiles, refunded the buyers, and sent Scothen back to his office to think about what he'd done.
Ooh, sounds like somebody's in trouble. Well, thanks for that report, Marcy.
You bet.
That's OPR's Marcy Hammond. Back in a moment. Plenty of other news that happened in the past 24 hours, but they were all pretty cut and dry and didn't really give me and my takes on them an opportunity to shine. So instead of telling you about them, we're going to answer a few questions that have been sent in by you, the listener, using the hashtag Leslie's Mail Sack. Our first question comes to us from Twitter user HeyDogVR, and they ask, why does most of the news focus on America and Americans? I live in Australia and nothing happens to us. Well, hey dog, it's like I always say, if you want to be covered on the topical, you need to do something newsworthy. So if Australia would like to be featured more on the podcast, they may want to consider loosening their gun laws or greatly upping their number of coronavirus cases. Then maybe they'll get some more airtime, but until that happens, we'll mostly be covering stories from right here in the good old US of A. All right, our next question comes to us from Nick Anderson on Twitter. He writes, my coworker rudely talked over your whole story. Could you repeat it or at least give me a basic rundown? Well, first off, I'm sorry that happened to you, Nick. Unfortunately, though, it's a no-can-do. I hate repeating myself. But the good news is that you can actually purchase a copy of today or any other day's episode of The Topical, so you can re-listen to all the day's top stories as much as you want. Just email us at opr@theonion.com, let us know the date of the episode you'd like to purchase, and for just $49.99, we'll send you a cassette of that day's show. Unless, of course, we were covering the coronavirus that day. Those episodes are a little more expensive since that news is pretty important. And finally, our last question of the day comes to us from Twitter user @StelStan, and they write, what's the music that plays at the beginning of each podcast? I have no clue why, but I love that tune so much. Well, that's very kind, but I'm honestly not sure what you're talking about. The Topical famously has no theme song and is the only daily news podcast that refuses to use any music whatsoever so as not to distract from our reporting. Whatever you've been hearing each and every day must all be in your head, and I would encourage you to seek professional psychiatric help if you continue to hear it, especially right now. And that's it for The Topical today. I'm Leslie Price. If you have a question you'd like to ask me about the news or the show or my relationship status, you can submit that question by using the hashtag Leslie's Mail Sack on social media or in the reviews on Apple Podcasts. Just please don't ask me anything hard. I don't want to have to put any time or effort into this. And don't forget to tune into tomorrow's episode where we'll sit down with a police officer who will demonstrate for us the proper technique for subduing a grand jury. You won't want to miss it. We'll see you tomorrow. The news doesn't stop just because this YouTube video has. For even more on all the worst things happening in the world right now, listen and subscribe to The Topical on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, you insatiable news freaks.